As we all know, most of you are quite actively associated with multiple efforts towards philanthropy in India, in the United States, and across the two countries. We know there are so many great efforts, so many great initiatives, but sometimes it feels like all these multiple efforts are quite isolated, quite fractured in the way they go about accomplishing things. And I was just talking earlier, some of the senior philanthropists in the hall were saying how, this is the kind of platform that we need to really bring about some concerted thinking, to really learn from each other. There are so many great initiatives, great foundations, great efforts happening. So I really applaud American Bazaar and Asif, and I don't know if Sujit is here, the American Bazaar team for really making this happen. And this is going to be an annual feature. So this is really bound to grow because there is the appetite for this, and it's going to grow year after year. So once again, thank you all for coming. We were too engrossed meeting friends and catching up with each other. We are a little behind time, but we will make up for that as the afternoon wears on. But I would now invite the first panelists and my good friend Nish Acharya to moderate the first session. Over to Nish and Suresh and Dr. Rai to come to the podium. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've filled up on your caffeine and are ready to go. We expect lots of questions. Venki, Asif, if whenever we have you need us to stop talking, please just turn off the mics or come up here and let us know, whatever you think makes sense. So welcome, everyone, to this conference. I think you're going to hear a whole bunch of really great speakers over the course of the day. This panel is particularly looking at initiatives by Indian Americans towards the development of India. And in particular, we're going to have two very interesting perspectives here today. We're going to have Suresh Shenoy with the Wheels Global Foundation and Dr. Sanjay Rai with Montgomery College talking about some of their initiatives for India. And so I think, let me set the stage more broadly about the work of Indian Americans in India. So I've taken on a variety of roles working on philanthropy. I was CEO of the Deshpande Foundation for many years, helped bring Akshay Patra Foundation to the US and set up their offices. And I think what we know is, frankly, the opportunity to do good work in India is unlimited, and the amount of work the Indian American community has done is still just a fraction of what it could be done. We essentially have 3 or 4 Indian NGOs that do a lot of fundraising in the United States. We have Akshay Patra, we have Pratham, we have the America-India Foundation, and maybe some others that are growing regionally. But essentially, given the number of high-quality NGOs in India that are having incredible impact, that's still a small number. In addition, as Venki and I were discussing earlier, when you go to Indian American philanthropy events, you tend to see a lot of the same faces at all the events, and it carries a social sort of air to it, which is fine. That's what nonprofit philanthropy often, the gala circuit often is like. But given that there's now 3 million of us in the United States, there's a much, much larger population to tap into. There's an entire second generation of ABCDs like myself who are not as engaged. And so, there's a lot to be done in terms of the building blocks to find out what people are interested in, what they're capable of doing in terms of money, time, connections, what have you, and to really turbocharging philanthropy from just a few groups and a few people into really something that mobilizes the broader community. I think on the heels of Prime Minister Modi's visit, right now is a very good opportunity to do that. There's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, 20,000 people screaming in Madison Square Garden, and how do we harness that energy for real work being done in the field? And so I think let's get started with that, with 2 examples of Indian Americans and their work to move their organizations to have impact. So Suresh, why don't we start with you and tell us about the Wheels Global Foundation. I know that you work on leadership training and that you're doing a lot to connect the dots of people and the activities they're doing in India across the board. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Very well. Nish, thank you very much. I also want to thank Asif and India Bazaar for taking this initiative and organizing this first platform of its kind, if you will, for the various efforts to come together. A little bit about how the Wheels Global Foundation started and its objectives. As some of you may know, we have a very, very vibrant community of alumni from the Indian Institute of Technology, which is my alma mater. And initially, it started when we first came here, no one really knew that India had such a rich human resource, that was available to the rest of the world. And many of the graduates of the Indian Institute of Technology, as have the doctors and others who have come here, have fared extremely well. But people did not know that. So we decided that branding was a very important element to make sure that people understood that these were very highly qualified people coming here and establishing their homes here. And then something happened. In 2005, we had a huge event here in Washington, D.C., and we also had the occasion of meeting with the then president of India. And he said, well, you guys talk a lot, but you don't do anything. So we said, well, we got to get together. And he said, you should not only think about giving back to the country of birth, but you should also consider giving back to the country by adoption. So think about the big problems that face both India and the United States and do something about it. So we convened a meeting of some senior folks from various academia, from industry, and so on and so forth. There were about 16 or 18 of us, including Sam Pitroda, who chaired the event at that time. And we identified 6 areas that were absolutely a major challenge for both India and the United States. And I'll just very briefly go over some of them, and some of the statistics are absolutely jarring. The first one was having to do with potable water. And we figured that 400 million people in India within the next decade or so will not have access to potable water. 400 million people, that's the population of the United States plus some. Even in the United States, I don't know how many of you have been following the drought in California. It's a major challenge. People within central California have had a very hard time getting access to potable water. So water was the #1 challenge. The second one that we identified was healthcare. And we sort of identified that 700 million people in India living in villages don't have access to good healthcare. And it's kind of an interesting thing that most recently, after Prime Minister Modi talked about sanitation as being a big issue, a group of doctors with whom we work very closely, who belong to API, said it's kind of interesting. Clean water and healthcare and sanitation all go hand in hand. They said that women in India don't eat or drink very much during daytime because there is no sanitation facility for them to go to. So as a result, women wait to eat and drink fluids late in the evening so they can go out and use the fields at night. And it has a direct impact on their health. So you can see how water and village lifestyles have a direct impact on healthcare as well. And in the United States, of course, healthcare has been a major challenge as well. The third area that had significance was education. And in the United States, we are talking about STEM education. In India, it's just the massive demand. Just today, just to meet today's demand for postgraduate education, India would have to build 20,000 universities just to meet today's demand. And each year, 26 million children enter the kindergarten space. That's more than the population of Australia and Canada and some of the Middle Eastern countries combined. So education is a big challenge. The fourth area is energy. And that goes without saying. In the United States, most recently, we have been able to sort of come out of our dependence on foreign oil to some extent through some innovative technologies that have been put in place. But in India, that's a huge challenge as well. It's not just about clean energy, but also energy in a manner that you don't ruin the environment. When there was the big Gulf oil spill, we got calls from India saying, gosh, if this were to happen in the Godavari basin, what are we going to do? So you can see that, that energy has got several aspects to it. The fifth area is rural lifestyles. And again, most people who live here in the greater Washington area don't realize that the moment you go past the Beltway, it's a different world out there. Even in rural America, they don't have access to broadband, for example. And that's also true in India. Access to basic communications is a big challenge in both countries. And there are other lifestyle issues, affordable housing, for example, sewer systems, and so on and so forth. So rural lifestyles is the fifth area. And the last one is sustainability and security. And that has to do with just making sure that these things can go on for a long time instead of just episodic or event-based sort of charity. And security, of course, speaks for itself, both cyber security and border security. The point was that we wanted to sort of come up with something what we call technology-enabled philanthropy. So it was not just a matter of sitting down and writing a check, although that always is an important element, but there had to be a technical solution that has significant social benefits. So the approach that we took, and by the way, water, healthcare, energy, education, lifestyles, and security falls neatly into this acronym called WHEELS. And there's some information that is available if you're interested. And I can give you a couple of examples of the kind of projects that we've done so far. And like any wheel, there are spokes. So when you talk about water, there are multiple different technological solutions, such as reverse osmosis, rainwater catchment, and so on and so forth. And what we have been attempting to do is, number one, create a database of expertise. There are people amongst us here who routinely solve these problems. And the question is, how can we leverage that knowledge base, if you will, to help projects in India, as an example, or even here? That's number one. Number two, we are trying to encourage the technology institutes, the IITs and others, to participate in this program, to come up with simple solutions that solve these big problems. So one good example is API, and we are doing this through other organizations who have feet on the ground, okay, who have the ability to deliver, whereas we have the ability to sort of bring the executive types and the entrepreneurs together. We don't have anyone who can deliver. So the way to do that is by forming partnerships with other organizations. So we have a relationship with the API, an MOU with API, the Association of American Physicians of Indian Origin, and they launched a program called Sevak in India. And they have adopted a few villages in Gujarat where they were trying to deliver insulin to various villages, and they found that a lot of this insulin gets sort of kind of spoiled just in transportation because they could not have cheap, affordable refrigeration. So we worked together with the IITs, the IIT Gandhinagar, and came up with some simple ideas where you take two pots, if you will, and one encased in another with water around it and keeps the temperature at 55 degrees and saves the insulin in transportation. Simple solution with huge payback. Similarly, some retired alumni of IIT Bombay did some studies in a small village called Ghanpur outside Hyderabad, and found that the entire water supply to the village was polluted. It was laced with arsenic and other heavy metals, and they had to find a way in which they can solve it. So they corresponded with us thanks to email, and for $3,500, which we raised literally within an hour, we were able to put in place a reverse osmosis plant at Ghanpur, where we could produce water for 2 rupees per liter, which was very affordable by the villagers. And that's what we mean by sustainability. And now, since that project, we've done 3 more around Andhra Pradesh, and we are now looking at projects in Gujarat. We are also, I'm sorry, yeah.
Maybe I could stop there. We can.
So I can give you a lot more examples, perhaps in the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Dr. Rai, why don't you tell us about what you're working on and the connection here today?
Sure. Thank you very much. And I really want to thank American Bazaar and especially Asif for bringing all of us together for such an important and exciting conversation. When you think about India, what comes to your mind is the young population. And you just heard about importance of education, especially in the post-secondary part of the education. If the next 20, 30 years for India, if India has to succeed, I think skill development and post-secondary education is going to be the key thing. Prime Minister Modi said, "Sabka haath, sabka saath." So I think in the hands of Indian youth, we have to impart the skills that are needed in the regional economy and perhaps in the global economy as well. So how do we go about doing that? How do we impart education? At this point, about 13% of the Indian students who are eligible for post-secondary education have access to some kind of post-secondary education. Generally, India's economic progress of last 20 years or so, higher education has played very little role in that. Higher education has stayed outside the story of India's progress. And for the next 20 or 30 years, that cannot remain that way. So in order to do that, we are Montgomery College. We are a community college in Maryland, outside Washington, D.C. Community colleges in the United States are affordable and accessible and model of higher education. We are open access institutions. Nationwide, there are about 1,200 community colleges around this country. Half of the undergraduate students in the United States are at a community college, and that number is about 13 million students. Total, about 25 million undergraduate students are there in the United States. Half of them are at community colleges. They are involved in workforce development in all sectors of economy, from manufacturing, service, to knowledge economy. 60% of nurses in the United States have education from a 2-year institution. Economic impact of community college in 2012 in the United States was about $809 billion. That's about 5.4% of national GDP, and about 15 million jobs were created by the trained workers from community colleges. So we looked at community college model, US community college model, as one possible solution for India's quest for the skill development and post-secondary education. So we have been working for the last several years with private entities and also with the Indian government in creating, not opening our own colleges in India, but creating capacity within the Indian system for this kind of model of higher education. At this point, in the United States, community colleges were developed right after the Second World War. Truman Commission brought a bill called GI Bill. Young men who went to the war, they left this country when the economy was agriculture-based. When they came back, it was industrial economy. So community colleges were created to train these soldiers to the new economy. We believe that the same model is true for India, and Indian government has already, the earlier government had planned 200 pilot community colleges. And I want to mention the role of Wadhwani Foundation. I think Dr. Ajay Kela is in the audience. Dr. Kela and Wadhwani Foundation played significant role in bringing several leadership from India and showing them community colleges around the country. We were part of those visits as well. And helping Indian decision makers understand this model of higher education and its applicability to the Indian environment. I'll stop here and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Great. So I'm going to get the discussion started with the first question, and then we'll open it up. I assume there's, if there's no mics available, there's one here, and we can certainly pass it around. Dr. Rai, so, you know, historically, higher education is one area where the United States has always been very connected with India. So the IITs, IIMs all had American partners. The Public Health Foundation of India a few years ago has partnerships with schools of public health. There's a program out of Massachusetts called the Indo-US Collaboration on Engineering Education, which has 20 American universities. So this is a great area for Americans to get involved with. American universities are interested. Also, there's so many Indian Americans in the higher ed sector, so it makes a lot of sense. My experience has been is that on the Indian side, it's been very hard to find the right partners and to figure out how to make progress for a variety of reasons, some good, some frustrating. My question for you is, how have you made how have you been able to make progress? What were the key steps? If somebody here is sitting and they're a trustee at a community college, or they teach an adjunct course or something like that, and they want their school to get involved, what's your advice to them? Where to start? What's the most important thing to do first, second, third, what have you?
So I think you rightly pointed out that Indian Institute of Technologies and Indian Institute of Managements had serious involvement from U.S. institution at their origin, and they turned out to be very well. So I think U.S.-India collaboration in higher education has a history of success. And as Montgomery College, when we began our involvement more seriously in India, it happened during President Obama's first visit to India. At that time, we were asked to develop a white paper about it. It is true that whenever you're trying to change or bring something new into a system that has been stagnant for 4 or 5 decades, there are going to be challenges. But higher education is like elephant. Even here, you can't make an elephant dance. It takes time. But I think based on last 3 or 4 years, the amount of work India has done, especially to my surprise, the government sector of India in pushing this forward, I think it's very positive. And there are a lot of very good people from the government, from the industry, and from the non-government organizational side. They're all interested. Most people see this need very clear. So I think the opportunity is right. Prime Minister Modi has already talked about skill development. There will be a new ministry for I think there is a ministry already. And that separation from Ministry of Higher Education and skill development, I think will be helpful. So I'm very hopeful.
Great. And Suresh, I want to ask you a question too about what need did you see for the Wheels Global Foundation? So, people may ask, there's lots of organizations, there's lots of ways to get involved. It looks like you saw a need to connect the dots with what people were doing and their interests. So what was that need that you see filling that the myriad activities of the community weren't sort of connecting on?
So the idea was to sort of figure out how we can help other organizations that are trying to do some really good work. So for example, we work with Greg here for Rooms to Read. We have worked with Pratham. We have worked with Ekal Vidyalaya and others as the need arises. By way of sort of raising awareness, trying to raise money to help them, especially if there is a technology component. Mm-hmm. So for example, most recently, there were a bunch of professors from IIT Bombay who came here, and they talked about their Akash platform, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the $40 laptop. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is not the laptop, but they have programs that run on Linux on that laptop that can translate anything into 40 languages, okay, which is one of those barriers in India. So we did a presentation to PG County because we see the same problem here. Because in Fairfax County we speak 169 languages. So that's the connecting the dots between good research work that's going on, where we can bring technology to bear. One thing about India is that the scale is enormous. It's huge. So distance education, Hiten Ghosh is here from Hughes. They have significant investments in satellite-based networks, both for healthcare and for education. So raising awareness, leveraging those platforms, and where necessary, raise funding for it. So
great. I'm going to open to the audience, so I can certainly ask questions, but if people have them, please.
If I may ask a question to Dr. Rai. Dr. Rai, you know, I feel that community colleges should be much more tailored or designed towards trade kind of colleges and schools, both in India and US. You know. In US, I can clearly see, I'm a physician, I take care of 20,000 patients, teenagers and kids, and that kids are not going to have traditional education anymore. You know, majority of the kids are now, they use about 6 hours of texting and video games a day, and they can concentrate for 5 minutes, and that's about 60–70% of all children in this area now, in the good schools, you know. I don't know about the bad schools. So having said that, you know, some of these kids are really very fit and appropriate for going into trade schools of all kinds, and there are hundreds of trades which are probably better for them to go into than to just go into a traditional college, you know.
I think your question is right on the money. This is why community colleges are very successful. We respond to the needs of the society more quickly than typical universities. At Montgomery College, we have excellent biotechnology program. Why is that? Because Montgomery County and the state of Maryland have about 500 life sciences companies. Just in Montgomery County, our revenue from life sciences companies is about $2.32 billion. Half of the students in our biotechnology program have already undergraduate or master's degrees in life sciences, but they don't have skills to work in our own life sciences industry. So we create programs that produce students who are work ready in the local economy. Local economy could be cybersecurity, biotechnology, or anything else. Coming to the other thing about the students using technology, I think that's a plus. If we have to bring cost of education down, or if we have to teach millions of students in India, the same model where you have to go to a building between 2 and 3 and take certain classes from 1 or 2 people, then only you can have a piece of paper that gives you a guarantee that you know you are educated. That model is already on its way out. And most colleges, including us, we are looking at open education resources. At my college, I looked at the top 10 most highly enrolled courses, and just the textbook cost was about $5 million. Now, wonderful open education resources are available. Nobody needs to use a textbook. So brings the cost down, but these materials are really very good, very active, very dynamic. It makes the course content more interesting. So that's another thing. Again, I want to bring Wadhwani Foundation because they are creating those materials in cybersecurity, health sciences, and other areas that could be used by other colleges and universities, and hopefully in India as well. In the context of India, I think I was asked the challenges. The challenge, I think, sometimes is our mindset. Often we talk about MITs, Harvards, those kind of elite institutions. But I think this time we have to put our focus on different kind of institutions. Not to say that those institutions are not important. They're important and they will always remain important. But where India is today, I think we need more skill-based education, more affordable education, more accessible education, and more relevant education.
So I'll just chime in on that. You know, one of the big problems there, again, I think in India, the University Grants Commission, which manages higher education, has only agreed that the top 400 universities in the world will be allowed in independently. And that's, those 400 are ranked arbitrarily by a group in China and then the Times of London. And those are perfectly good organizations, but it's fairly arbitrary in terms of its connection to India's needs. And so we had a community college in Massachusetts that has a wonderful long-haul trucking education program, teach people how to drive trucks for long distances. If any of you have been in India, you know that this is really a need, that you need truckers who actually know how to drive. And so there's a need for that program, but right now the Indian government wants the Harvards and the MITs and the others, and that's, I think it's frankly very silly. I think it's very frustrating for me to do that. If Indian organizations can find partners, that's one thing. But if they want to go in on their own and offer whatever it is they want to offer, I mean, there's certainly, as you said, no lack of need, and particularly there's a need beyond the top-tier institutions and all.
Yeah. So if you go to a place called Chhattisgarh and the city Raigad, Jindal Steel and Power Limited has a huge steel and power company there. They have a small community colleges run by them. And we have helped them to create exactly that kind of a truck driving program. And that one small program is doing well. How do we scale it up?
Right.
Just so along those lines, I think someone here mentioned that not the top tier schools in India are doing well. They're okay. So there are 3,500 ITIs, institutes for training, technical institutes, and through a lot of dialogue with the government now, I think the government of India has allowed to privatize these ITIs. So anyone here who wants to adopt an ITI, you can take it over and develop programs for skills development. And in fact, there's a group of software engineers in Seattle that sat down and developed simulation software for teaching people how to drive trucks and so on and so forth. And that's another way to scale it, if you will.
Yeah, I think those are both great examples. We got questions all over the place. So may I ask, we have only about 7-8 minutes, so please be succinct with your questions. So. Yes. Can you repeat the question, please? So the question was, it was actually a comment that the Indians need to develop their own curriculum based on local needs.
I think that certainly that's true. India needs to adopt to the system, create its own curriculum. But the point here is, how do you create that curriculum that addresses your needs? I think that's where I think some collaboration can be helpful.
You have a question here?
Yeah, I think I'd first of all compliment you, Dr. Rai, about your vision about community college is the right model for India. By 2020, India would be the largest young population in the whole world. 70% of the people lives in villages. They don't have access to people like me, etc., who go to IIT and so on. For them, this is the right model, and already some of the examples that we have done, as Suresh pointed out, we did a 26 Gurukul in India, where basically is a vocational training, where we take, the Guru is a teacher, and we, with the help of the CII, we brought young people who have no other place to go and taught them the so-called driving, etc., very rudimentary vocational school. Their mothers will guarantee that when they get the job through CII, a part of the salary will come back, providing for other students to come and join. It was a very successful program. Chhattisgarh, etc., we have all over India. And so this one now can be taken another stage, various stages, and these people can then participate in the technology progress of the country. Why it is only the people who can go to IITs, etc., can enjoy the benefits of technology? Why not the young people in the villages can have the same opportunity? So,
Great.
compliment to you. This is extremely, should be the very high priority in both sides.
We had some questions in the back as well? Yes. Let's go to the back first. We'll come back.
Thank you. I know we are dealing with the older youth, but I'm concerned about the young kids in schools in the villages of India, and most of the population is there. We still know that. And a couple of years ago, I was working with the government officials here to set up library systems in India, the public libraries. And I mean, if we are looking for the same exact thing, the problem in America and India, we need lifelong learners there. And lifelong learning system is really not in our culture, back home at least, because kids don't have access to at least in the villages and smaller towns, there are no libraries. So I'd be very, very happy if Montgomery College and the organization like Wheels could set up a platform to be able to make little kiosks in smaller towns where people could come and access books and actually start reading and then go on to IITs, you know. And that's going to bring up the level of India.
Thoughts on libraries?
Well, actually, Rooms to Read is doing a phenomenal job of doing precisely that, and I'm sure that Craig can probably talk about it. I think he's on the agenda as well. So, AIF and others are working towards similar goals, if you will. So there are quite a few programs.
Okay, I have a very specific question to Dr. Roy. I mean, you said you had quite success in the biotech and industry. So my question to you, what particular area in the biotech industry Montgomery College is training the kids in locally here? And also biotech industry, what kind of really trained very specific skills they needed these used to they can be absorbed in the local industry here?
So biotechnology industry locally is growing. Biomanufacturing is growing. If you come to our program, you will learn how to run bioreactors, and you will work on exactly the same kind of bioreactors, same kind of software that is used by Human Genome Sciences or MedImmune. So completely same. The only thing is that Human Genome Sciences have a bioreactor that's 20,000 gallons. Ours is about 5.1 liters. Exactly the same thing. Same thing can be scaled up. Same is true for cybersecurity. Same is true for engineering. We have a wonderful engineering program, about 1,600 students. Nobody should start with University of Maryland College Park or MIT. Start with us, and you pay 1/3 of the tuition. Small classes, wonderful facilities. Our science centers, we spend about $200 million. Great facilities, great faculty. Send your kids to Montgomery College here. On the other question about lifelong learning, I think our system in India also discourages lifetime learning. First, you don't have access and availability to those kind of programs. And when you look at applications to colleges and universities, you will see the age limit. For everything, we put an age limit, and that's the mindset everything starts. And what happens is that as soon as you see that age limit, you finish your college, you stop learning. You think learning is stopped right there. If you come to a community college, you will say classes for senior citizens. Senior citizens take free classes. They don't have to pay.
Gentlemen.
I can ask a question.
Actually, I think he was, if you don't mind, I'm going to go here first.
Thank you. Good evening. So one of the things we're working on as an organization is looking at how do we create a new global curriculum that's world-class that we can give away to the planet for free, as a way to alter school systems by giving them choices not to buy curriculum, instead paying teachers, as a way to also bring world-class education to villages, not just in India, but rural areas around the world. So there's a bunch of infrastructure issue questions, technology issues, self-governance, and all sorts of things that we need. And our objective is to capitalize on the knowledge that exists, not in those of us that are in the working age, but also our other communities that are now retired, and capture that wisdom too. So do you have any advice, and this really question is for all of you, what advice would you provide us to say, like, these are some places we should start, some organizations we should have conversations with? So anything you could provide.
So I think I'll just say this quick, there's a variety of organizations here today that work on education in rural India. So I think just getting into one school, one village is actually really pretty hard. So I would start there. We can chat offline, but I think that's perfect for Suresh, building the network.
Well, there have been some studies done on that, and the interesting thing is, there are two types of thinking along those lines, if you will. The first is, how do you sort of get access to existing knowledge, okay? And there are libraries. There is the internet has made this a very small world, and access to existing knowledge should be for free. And to the question earlier, build libraries, access to library, access to information in general. But what is important is also discovering new knowledge. That is a skill set that a lot of the institutes in India have not done very well. A lot of Indians who come here take a while before they become good research scientists. And one of the problems that even the IITs have is the reason why they cannot scale the system is because there are not enough faculty who have got the necessary discovery skills. Okay. So to your point, it's a big world. There's a lot of information out there, and it's becoming smaller, if you will, the world, in terms of connectivity. So, and the problem is not just in India, by the way. I mean, we have also participated in a program called Everybody Wins DC. And some of us went to a local school here in Washington, not far from here, where 80% of the kids came from foster homes and had reading problems. Okay? And all you have to do is spend 1 hour of your time to sit down and read a book to them. Great program. So it's not unique to India. You know, there are pockets here in the United States which are crying out for some solutions as well. So I'll leave you with that.
So we'll give the last question to the gentleman.
Well, I'm just going to the basic simple that when I talk to my relatives and all in Bombay, for example, or Mumbai, almost so many young family are trying to put their kids to elementary, middle school and all that. But almost everybody has to spend a lot of time and money for tuition and all that kind of stuff, and that's the only way to complement that. And that's a lot of burden, because in this country, when I came, I just, my kids went to government schools and all that. So when you see that, libraries and all that, like she said, that's fantastic. And I think what is basically missing is some of the parents and all that are not well educated. They don't know how to help. And I think if we forget about IIT and all that, we've been there, all those places. I mean, that's fine. I think there's so massive level of population in India that doesn't matter how many millions of engineers are there. It still doesn't make a dent on that, because when you hit, the world is competing, the China and Filipino, they just wipe us out in many quality. I think what we have to go through basically and give less burden to those parents who hardly make any money because they are not making that kind of money. So they're putting everything in that, and there's no proper charities. They're going back from all the social, that relatives or caste and all that. And I think that structure is not there, at least what I see from Bombay. I don't know about the rest of India, but I think somebody has to hit that low level and forget about, those top level. And if IIT people want to come up with something, that's fine. But I just feel that's missing, really important. And those guys will come up, because now you're going to have good competition. Because otherwise, you're going to go on and on and on. And all the elite will do it, and there's a big gap goes on, and someday India may not be peaceful, Thank you.
Great. So we've run out of time, so what I want to do is give each of you just a quick minute to talk about how somebody can get involved with your work. So, yeah, sure.
Well, the first thing is, this is not we see this as a marathon. It's a long race, if you will. It's not something that we can do in a couple of weeks, sit down and come up with solutions. And the nature of the problems are going to change, the solutions are going to change, and we need everyone to be involved. Most importantly, when I look around the room here, and I think that wild guess is that 80, 90% of people here are first generation, people like me who came here to this country, and I don't see our children here. So the next generation of leadership needs to be built, and that starts at home. There are some significant initiatives in that regard. I think bringing that next generation of Indians to realize that they are American. Raj Dave and Hiten and others are working on some programs along those lines. And the key is that Teddy Roosevelt famously said that if we all were to be known as hyphenated Americans, as Scandinavian Americans and French Americans and Indian Americans and so on, this would be a babel of various parts of the world who would never get along well with each other. So the first thing that we have to realize is that once we have adopted this as our country, we are American. Great. And we should drop the hyphenated part as Indian Americans. We can say that we are of Indian origin, but we are American. And that's what we should inculcate in our children and solve the big problems together, build that leadership so they see the big picture and they work on the same lines, if you will, and to solve problems not only in India but also here.
And your website, real quick?
Our website is wheelsglobalfoundation.org.
Great. Sanjay?
I'm going to ask you to do just one simple thing. No matter where you live in United States, there is a community college within 20 minutes drive from where you live. Please go and spend few hours there. Understand what this system is and look at its relevance in the context of India. If you want to help us India Initiative, Montgomery College. There's a website. You have a lot of information there. My name is there. You can write to me directly, and I'm very, very happy to hear from you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Suresh. And thanks, everyone, for your good questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Venki.